Hi, welcome back to my channel. Today I've got another Mystery Mondays for you, and this is about the abduction and murder of a little girl called Sarah Payne. Now this case was quite big in England when I was little. I don't really remember that much of it because I was quite young, but reading this it does kind of bring some memories back of, oh yeah, I do actually remember that, and it's quite hard hitting actually. I just want to say that I don't mean any disrespect to any of the families that I mentioned in this video. This is just information that I've collected from the internet and I am sharing it now with you. So if you want to see what really happened to Sarah Payne, then just keep watching. Now Sarah was born Sarah Evelyn Isabel Payne on the 13th of October 1991 in Walton-on-Thames, Surrey in England. She died on the 1st of July 2002 at the age of just 8 years old. Now, to give you a bit of a backstory on the family, Sarah lived a very happy life with her parents and her 3 siblings. She had 2 older brothers and they were 11 and 13 at the time of her disappearance. And she also had a younger sister who was just 6 when she disappeared. Now, quite often the Paynes would go and visit Sarah's grandparents, Terence and Leslie Payne, in Kinston Gorse, West Sussex in England. They lived in a little house on the beach. It was very common for the Paynes to go and visit the grandparents maybe once a month. And like I said, they were a really well together, happy, loving family. Now, Sarah's grandparents also lived near a cornfield, and on the day of her disappearance, Sarah, her younger sister Charlotte, and her 2 brothers Luke and Lee were playing hide and seek in the cornfield. Their grandparents were still in the home, and Sarah's mum and dad had gone into town to, I think they were going to meet some friends, but they weren't actually with the children at the time that Sarah disappeared. However, with the older brothers being 11 and 13, the parents decided they were in quite a safe community. They knew the area fairly well, seeing as they go up there so often, and the grandparents' house was so close to where they were playing to, they knew that they could just walk straight back there without the need of an adult, and obviously the oldest sibling could go with them. When the children were all playing hide and seek, Sarah decided that she didn't want to anymore for I'm not exactly sure what reason. I think she might have fallen over and hurt herself, but she decided that she just wanted to go back to grandparents' house. So the eldest sibling, Lee, said that he would go with Sarah back to the grandparents' house so she wouldn't have to walk alone. And while they were both walking through the cornfield, Sarah was just slightly in front of him. He heard behind him his youngest sister Charlotte fall and turned around just for a split second to check and see if she was okay and that Luke was with her and she was going to be okay. But when he turned back around, Sarah was gone. He called for her and he ran out of the cornfield, and this is where he saw a man in a white van waving at him and driving off. Obviously at the time he didn't really think anything of it, however you will see why this was very significant later on in this video. So there is absolutely no sign of Sarah. Lee is frantically trying to search for her. He goes back to his brother and sister to see if they've seen her, and again they haven't. So they are looking around for her in the cornfield, but ultimately decide they're going to go back to grandparents' house to see if maybe she went in a different direction and just ran back there. When Luke, Lee and Charlotte got back to grandparents' house, they said that Sarah wasn't there. So they thought that maybe Sarah had gone into the town to find her mum and dad. They waited for Sarah's parents to get back and Sarah wasn't with them, and they said that they obviously hadn't seen Sarah since she was playing with her siblings in the cornfield. Her parents knew straight away that she was now a missing person and immediately phoned the police after the whole family trying to search for her and calling her name, shouting for her, searching everywhere they could. They decided to phone the police. There was a huge nationwide search done for Sarah within 48 hours of her disappearance. Sarah's parents also put out appeals onto the television, but nobody came back with anything. On July the 17th, which was 17 days after Sarah Payne went missing, a body was found. This body was found in Poolborough, about 15 miles away from where Sarah and her siblings were playing that evening. And after some forensic testing, they did confirm that unfortunately this was the body of Sarah Payne. This now flipped the investigation into no longer a missing persons investigation, but now a murder investigation. Police were said to have questioned a few suspects, but nothing really came up on those apart from one. And that man was Roy Whiting. Now, Roy was a registered sex offender living in the area, and he was just 5 miles away from where Sarah's body was found. Roy Whiting was routinely questioned by the police due to him being on the sex offenders register, so it wasn't uncommon for them to go knocking on the door and asking him questions. When they first went to question him, he actually wasn't there, but police didn't want to give up on him and actually went back 5 hours later. He was questioned in the police station for over an hour before he was eventually let go because he didn't give up any information, and at the time there wasn't any evidence to actually link him to this crime. After he had been questioned, Roy Whiting walked to his van, which was a white van, and an undercover policeman spotted him and actually arrested him there at the scene. This was of significance to the undercover policeman because the brother of Sarah obviously said that he saw a man in a white van waving at him and driving away. He spent 2 days in custody, but unfortunately police couldn't find any evidence which tied him to the case, so they released him on bail. Now, for Roy's alibi, he said that he was at a fun fair by himself in Hove at around 5:30 p.m. on the night of Sarah's disappearance and returned to his flat at about 9:30 p.m. However, police actually found a petrol receipt showing that Roy Whiting wasn't in Hove on the day of Sarah's disappearance. This receipt was from the Buck Barn garage on the A24 in Coolham, which was where one of Sarah Payne's shoes were actually found. Now, the shoe was found on a roadside in a village in Coolham. This obviously completely destroyed Whiting's alibi that he was in Hove on the day of Sarah's disappearance because they found evidence that in fact he wasn't. So their suspicions rose again that maybe this might be the man that they'd been searching for. So police ended up doing more searches into Roy Whiting and where he was on the day of Sarah's disappearance. They ended up doing some forensic researching and found so much evidence against him. A strand of Sarah's hair was found on Roy Whiting's jumper, and fibres of Roy Whiting's van was found on Sarah's hair and on the shoe that was found on the side of the road. The really sad thing about this is that Sarah's shoe was the only item of clothing found, which suggests that Roy Whiting may have either raped her or was involved with some sort of sexual act with her. This was more than enough evidence to arrest Roy Whiting and get him into a trial room where he would later be convicted. Throughout his 3-week trial, Roy denied having anything to do with Sarah's abduction and murder and tried to maintain his innocence, but the forensic evidence was just way too much, and the jury found him guilty in January of 2001. He was sentenced to life in prison and won't be eligible for parole until 2041. The judge described him as an evil man, every parent's nightmare, which is exactly what he was. He was completely and totally evil. He was just a horrible, horrible person. Roy Whiting was actually earlier convicted of the sexual assault of a 9-year-old girl 5 years before Sarah's murder. He snatched this little girl from a park in Crawley and forced her to do horrible things to him. He later then just dumped her body on the roadside near to where he lived. He was jailed for 4 years for this, but only served 30 months of his sentence for sexually assaulting and dumping a little girl on the roadside. Now, going back to the day that Sarah disappeared, what they found had actually happened to her was that when her brother Lee turned around to check that his younger sister and younger brother were okay, Sarah had gotten out of the cornfield where Roy Whiting was waiting and snatched her and dumped her in the back of his van. Obviously, unbeknownst to Lee, he was the man that was waving at him, and he had no idea that his little sister was in the back of that van. This must be so horrible for Lee to have to live with. It wasn't his fault at all, but he saw Sarah's killer and obviously had absolutely no idea, but he must just have so many nightmares and flashbacks about that day. He had no idea that his little sister was in the back of that van. An autopsy revealed that Sarah died by either strangulation, suffocation, or a combination of both, all done by Roy Whiting. Sarah's parents then got involved with the police and they created something called Sarah's Law. Now you can Google what this actually is, but in short it is so that parents can actually go to the police and find out if there are sex offenders living in the area, or if anybody that their children are in contact with have a criminal record. This is all done confidentially between the police and that person. Now for me, this is one of the worst child abduction cases, just because of the fact that her brother saw him and just had no idea what was about to happen, that his sister was there with that horrible man. So that is pretty much it for my video today. I hope that you guys found this story interesting, and maybe if you didn't know about it, you are a bit more educated now. Let me know in the comment box below what you want to see for my next Mystery Mondays. If you liked this video, then just give it a thumbs up. Don't forget to click that subscribe button down below, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye!